alaikum and welcome back. You've just tuned into Women's AM. This morning I'm joined by Sister Nusrat and our special guest Rachel Hawkes. Welcome back. So today we're talking about polycystic ovaries, and we know that you work with a charity called Verity. Can you tell us a little bit about what it is and what you do?
Sure. So just to set the scene first, polycystic ovary syndrome is the most common women's health condition. It affects 1 in 5 women in the UK, and it has a range of different symptoms from not ovulating, infrequent periods, acne, excess hair, hair loss. So it's a really wide and vast condition that has a massive impact on a woman's life. So I'm the chair of Verity. We're the national UK charity for women with the condition, and we've been going since 1997. So our role is about providing information and support and really supporting women at every stage of their journey with the condition.
It's definitely a good thing to have, because a lot of the times there isn't that much information in terms of this condition, especially where women can actually go to and seek support, because sometimes it might be difficult to actually bring these symptoms together and, you know, kind of come to that conclusion for some women.
Absolutely. And I think when a woman gets diagnosed, it's often the first time that she's hearing about the condition, and that's something that we really try hard to change. And it's, you know, it's a difficult thing to go through. So having a place to go that can provide that information, because there is a lot of information on the internet now particularly, but it's often incorrect and it's not verified by medical experts and so on. So having a trusted source is really important.
Which is why, fortunately, we have you today to be actually going into this discussion and explaining what it is and what people can do in terms of, you know, support and treatment as well. So without further ado, let's get right to the topic. Polycystic ovary syndrome is a common condition that affects how a woman's ovaries work. Millions of women in the UK are affected with this condition. It is thought that around 1 in 10 women have PCOS. However, these figures may be higher. So what do we as women and as a community need to know about this condition, and how do we know if we have it and what treatment is available? Remember, this is a live discussion, so if you want to comment or ask a question on this topic, please do call in. The number is on your screens now. So we've kind of talked about, you know, briefly what polycystic ovaries are, but what are the main features of this condition, Rachel?
It can be very varied. So in one woman it might present, she might have excess hair, she might not be ovulating, and she has infrequent periods. In another woman she might be overweight and she might be losing the hair on her head. So it really presents very differently. So it's difficult often to diagnose. So I think being aware of the whole range of symptoms, and then just keeping an eye. If you've got 1 or 2, then maybe go and chat to your doctor, or, you know. Yeah.
It's kind of it's one of those conditions that, you know, if you don't fit a certain mold, sometimes they don't end up diagnosing you properly, because actually from my own experience, I went in and I didn't know that I had PCOS, and the GP didn't think so either, and kind of dismissed me and, you know, kind of made me out as if I was being vain when I talked about, you know, my symptoms, and they said, oh, do you know what? A lot of women, you know, go through certain changes and things like that. You know, it's fine, just go to the salon type thing. And it was really disheartening.
And I think that unfortunately your story is not uncommon. We hear that a lot, and other women get told we should be thankful not to have a cycle every month. So, you know.
Yeah, it's actually it's quite sad, and if you don't fit that mold, they won't often, you know, kind of probe as to why you're feeling certain things or why you're having certain, you know, going through certain symptoms.
That's why I think it's really important as well, when you are having these symptoms, to actually even write it down, like keep a diary of, you know, of your menstrual cycle, how that's going, any feelings that you may be having, and even any bodily changes, so you can actually not only tell the doctor, but even show in terms of your actual document of this, and then they have to take that seriously.
I think you make a really good point. I think having it written down in front of you, because some women or people generally can feel intimidated talking to a doctor, so having it written down on paper can help give you a little bit of confidence in having that discussion, and when you're losing track of your thought, you can just refer back to what you've got written down. And there are some amazing GPs out there, and I think that the most important thing, no matter what medical condition you have, but particularly with something as complex as PCOS, it's about being your own advocate. And if you're not happy with the with the treatment you're getting from your GP then change. I had a wonderful GP when I got diagnosed, and I'd never heard of PCOS before, but he was able to recognise a few different symptoms that I didn't even know were in any way related. So
yeah, because it's quite surprising sometimes, the kind of, like you said, you know, it's a varying sort of symptoms, and you don't necessarily put these things together, and it's quite surprising when you hear how actually it's all related, and it's all sometimes to do with the hormones, and you know, and even just knowing about what these cysts are, because sometimes you kind of, you know, get a scare of, oh my goodness, I've got, you know, cysts around my ovaries. What does this mean for me? What does it mean for my future? I mean, you know, some people might think that, you know, it causes infertility. I mean, is this true?
Yeah. So firstly, I'd just like to clear up, because this is a misconception that we get quite a lot, is that the cysts in polycystic ovary syndrome are not actual fluid-filled cysts that grow bigger and burst and hurt. It's actually quite a badly named condition. There's a lot of talk at the moment about renaming the whole condition, but these are where your eggs have not developed properly and ovulated, so they have the appearance of cysts. So it can be definitely scary, but not to worry that it's going to grow large and burst and cause all sorts of pains. But it is definitely linked with infertility. It's the leading cause of infertility in women. But there is treatment available, and many women do go on to have children.
Well, that's a good thing, because you know, you get scared as soon as you hear cysts. You think, oh my goodness, this is going to affect, you know, my ability to have children. So it's definitely good to know that there are treatments and ways of getting around that. But you know, a lot of people don't understand why it happens. I mean, why is it that, you know, you develop PCOS? Is it something that, you know, you're kind of predisposed to? Is it something that builds up? Nusrat, what have you sort of found out through your bit of research?
I think in terms of polycystic ovaries, if someone in your family may have suffered from it, it can sometimes transfer. So there is that, so it can happen.
They believe it is genetically linked.
It can be genetically linked. So from that, you're also encouraged to even find within your line, somebody may have had it, always get tested. So you find now the increase of mothers and daughters actually frequently getting tested. But apart from it being linked, it can also be sometimes, apart from genetic, environmental factors, lifestyle factors as well. But usually it's mainly towards the genetic. No one can really explain as to why it happens. It just does. And there's nothing essentially from that you can do. If you have the gene, you have the gene.
That's correct. And it comes from both your father's line and your mother's line. So it's not just because if your mum has it or your sister has it. Also look to your father's relatives as well. But so they do, like you say exactly, that they believe it's genetically linked, and it can be that you might go your whole life and never develop the actual syndrome, but they think maybe it's the lifestyle or different environmental factors that push you over the edge to developing the syndrome.
What are these sort of environmental factors that you say that could push you? Because sometimes we think, like, you know, if it's something that I could perhaps try to prevent or reduce, what sort of things could you do in that sense?
Unfortunately for some women, there is nothing that they can do. They will either have the syndrome or not, and others it might be weight management related, so it would be about lifestyle. PCOS is linked to insulin resistance, so making sure that you can keep an eye on your glucose loads and all of that is very important as well.
Well, that's quite surprising, because I've never, I don't think I've ever made that connection between sort of perhaps insulin resistance or diabetes with PCOS, so that's definitely something that's very important to kind of keep an eye on.
Women with PCOS are at an increased risk of getting type 2 diabetes and also other really serious long-term health problems like cardiovascular disease and endometrial cancer. So it's not just an infertility condition or an excess hair condition. There's really serious long-term health risks that people need to be mindful of and to manage them, their lifestyle around.
So it's not just about sort of what's on the exterior.
Absolutely.
It very much affects the interior as well.
So it's kind of like a cumulative effect. It can have higher chances of other illnesses cropping up as well. So that's something to pay attention to.
If you take the weight problem, for example, so it is harder for women with PCOS to lose weight, but it's also much easier for them to put weight on. So if they're putting on weight easier and it's harder for them to lose it, obviously year after year their weight without proper management will creep up and up and up. Then that puts them at higher risk of type 2 diabetes. It puts them at higher risk of cardiovascular disease and so on. So it's like a vicious circle.
So it's something that you always kind of have to stay on top of. It's not something that you kind of say. Unfortunately, yeah. I think it's
lifelong.
It's an unfortunate thing, but sometimes it could be a really positive thing in the sense that you make certain changes, lifestyle changes that actually not just because of the PCOS and what it could lead to, but just for your general overall health is very beneficial.
And we see a lot of our members and just women in the PCOS community online as well that really do manage to get their symptoms and their condition under control. And I don't want to use the word remission, but similarly that they're not impacted so much anymore by making certain changes. Or
so you sort of alleviate some of the symptoms.
For some women. Some women will try, no matter how hard they try, they won't be able to manage it. It just won't have that impact for them. But that's where you need to get a really good working relationship with your GP or a PCOS specialist like an endocrinologist or something like that.
And what should you do if you think you have it? So we talked about maybe going to the GP, but what besides going to the GP could you do if you think you do have PCOS?
So the first thing you might want to do before you go to GP is, like you pointed out, write a list of all of the things that you're noticing in your body and how it's changing, and to go into online groups. There's so many thousands of women online that have the condition and are there and ready and willing to provide information and support to people. So you can go and ask a question and get a really supportive answer back. And I think that that's a really valuable tool, just to educate yourself and build up your confidence and your knowledge, so you go armed to the GP.
It's quite interesting that you say that, because I know when I was first told, oh, it's PCOS, I actually kind of spoke to a few friends of mine and I said, you know what, I haven't got a clue what this is. I've read up about it and there's so many different things, and have you ever heard of this? And then a friend of mine said, actually, my sister does have it. She's had it for quite a long time. Why don't you speak to her? And it actually proved to be really, really helpful to speak to someone else who, who's aware of it, who's, been aware of it for a long time, to actually say, oh, this has been my experience. These are things that you can do that I've tried, and see if that helps. And, definitely kind of keeping a note of everything as well definitely helps, because that's kind of helped me, like you say, go armed to the GP with plenty of information. Because I remember the first couple of times I went to the GP, because I hadn't put things down, it was very hard to explain things in a really fluid term and give specific sort of times and dates to, show how serious it was.
And looking for other environmental factors that might impact on how your condition is. So whether you're really stressed at a particular period in time, and that might have an impact on your condition and so on. And I really applaud you and everyone else that is not afraid to come out and say that they have PCOS. I think sometimes because of the way it kind of attacks our sense of femininity, it can be embarrassing for people to talk about. And I think breaking down that level of embarrassment and shame is really important. And that's how we can improve treatment for everyone.
Definitely. I think it's something that we definitely need to speak about, especially within certain communities as well. Certain topics are very difficult to speak about, especially where it pertains sort of to the fertility and the woman's body and things like this.
I think particularly as well within the Muslim community, people should raise awareness, not just from a medical perspective. So Muslim doctors actually raising this awareness, even community level, that's needed. Also, in addition to actually writing and keeping a note of your bodily changes, even showing pictures to your GP. So where there's been hair growth, having actually a visual documentary, that actually helps very much more. And even doing personal research, whether that be in terms of book research or watching videos on it, so that when you have all this information, you can even talk about it with friends who can actually help you, even if their knowledge may be more than yours or even less than yours. So having the support very much is needed.
Absolutely, I completely agree. And we will come back to the rest of the discussion. We're off to a break, but do stay tuned for the rest of this discussion on polycystic ovaries. But before we go, take a look at this week's competition.